We are back here on the Analyticaliowan podcast. It is Monday, December 1st, as you are listening to this. And of course, we got a lot to talk about. Now, this is a big month. We got a lot going on this month. Not only is it the beginning of the month of Christmas and we got the holidays coming up and we're barreling toward the end of the year, we are also starting really now getting into primary season. First primary contests are already in March, just a short 4 months away. And by now, candidates have been announcing, I'm sure you're seeing campaigning, and there's going to be more and more events as the build up toward primary season uh, commences as we get closer. And we're going to be talking a lot about breakout candidates and things as things start to really shape up. And we could see some more shakeup within the parties as certain people say they're not running, they step away, what have you, or as some people get beaten in their primary races, changing the nature of the contest. So we got a lot to talk about with that. As that comes up, we'll be looking at that this month. But right now, the biggest story going on is the talk of going on with these boats from Venezuela that have been sunk by this administration. We're up to somewhere around 20, I think. It's hard to keep track of everything going on with them and that how many have actually been sunk, but it's something like 20 boats or something. I don't know how many people have been killed by strikes by this administration. Now, I've talked about it before. I'm going to mention it again. This administration claims these boats are running drugs, contraband. Okay. And they're saying, well, we're stopping it from coming in. So we're just getting rid of it. But that's not how they should handle it. How they should properly deal with this and properly handle it would be um, to go ahead and let them hit U.S. waters, have the Coast Guard intercept the boats, because if we know where they are, we can track them the whole way with GPS and satellites and things like that. And once they hit U.S. water, seize the boat, search it, and if they are in fact smuggling like they claim, you know, destroy the contraband and put them on trial. But that's not what this administration is doing. What this administration is actually doing is much, much worse. They're saying, well, we know there's contraband on there, and without going through any due process, and we know this administration doesn't care about due process, they turn around and they're just blowing up the boats. Well, this information about one of the strikes was leaked out, and it puts Pete Hegseth in a horrible light. Apparently, during one of the strikes, one of the ships was blown up, and as the remains of the ship was sinking, etc., and as the boat was on fire, some of the survivors were clinging to the boat. They were fighting for their lives and in no way able to continue to attack U.S. citizens or to attack the military or anything like that, right? They're hanging to the edge of this boat, and through orders from Pete Hegseth, he told them to kill them all, and that is well, if we were in an active war situation with Venezuela or these cartels, we can't really declare war on an organization, it would have to be the country. But anyway, it would probably be considered a war crime. Now, we push to have other leaders who commit war crimes put on trial through the International Criminal Court, etc., and to hold them accountable. And since we are not at war, it's probably murder. Now, simple fact of the matter, they're not following proper protocol. They're not doing anything. But this is going to get bad for this administration. Why? Because they are doing two investigations. Both are bipartisan in Congress, one in the House, one in the Senate. It's showing that the party is fracturing when it comes to Donald Trump. He's not getting his way nearly as much as he used to. He is going to be having to face accusations on this. Now, of course, Donald Trump claims to not know anything about it when asked. He didn't know anything about that, and he doesn't think Pete Hegseth would have said to kill them all. Of course, it wasn't what Donald Trump would have wanted. But for somebody who claims to know everything and to be the smartest person in the room at any given time, just ask him, he'll tell you. He sure seems to not know a lot. He deflects to other people more and more. He doesn't, whenever he's asked tough questions like this, did you know about it? Nope, didn't know a thing. Don't know anything about that. Oh, that guy, I barely knew him. Sure seems to never know anything when you ask him. Now, maybe that part's actually true, is that he doesn't know anything. But anyway, these two joint investigations are going to be bad news for Pete Hegseth. Now, with that going on, what could happen out of this? Well, a number of things. As the investigation goes, it could lead to something akin to what they are already looking at doing. They're talking about a war powers resolution coming out of the Senate, which would require Senate confirmation for any more use of military uh, force against Venezuela or any votes, etc., and would require an authorization from Congress if Donald Trump were to engage with Venezuela. Now, he has said that they have pretty much shored up everything and stopped all the drugs coming in from boats from Venezuela, and now that they're going to pretty soon start land attacks. Well, that sounds like a war. And now Donald Trump may want to start a war because he thinks it's going to somehow save him and make him more popular. It's not going to do either. Now, he thinks this is going to make him look like a tough guy. Donald Trump is not a tough guy. He's appearing more and more weak as the days and weeks go on here. And with the party cracking around him, he's desperately trying to hang on to that power. Now, with these joint investigations, how far could it go? It could ultimately lead to the impeachment and removal of Pete Hegseth. Now, Donald Trump may try to get out in front of it if it looks like it's going to go bad for him and ask for Hegseth's resignation. Hegseth himself may end up resigning. But what could happen? Could he face criminal charges? He could, but not under Pam Bondi or with her as head of the DOJ. That's not going to happen. Now, Pete Hegseth was a member of the National Guard. He was a major, I believe. And I believe the National Guard works the same way as the regular standing military, which means he could end up getting called back potentially and get court-martialed for this. But beyond that, so could any of the other people involved. The admirals, I believe it was SEAL Team 6 that actually carried out the strikes, those kind of things. Any of them could end up getting court-martialed for this for either giving or following unlawful orders. Now, is this administration going to actually go through with it? Probably not, unless the tide of public opinion turns far enough against this administration. I don't see Donald Trump doing anything about it because that's just not who he is. He ends up caring more about public opinion and how people perceive him than he does anything else. He doesn't care about whether or not he's on the right side of history or the wrong side of history. There's just his public image. That's all he cares about. So when they go through this whole and they do this investigation, it's going to open a lot of eyes, and it could start again continuing to increase the fracture in the Republican Party. And ultimately, if public outcry is bad enough, just like the Epstein files, they could end up turning on Donald Trump and deciding that, hey, we got to get rid of Donald Trump in favor of J.D. Vance. Now, do they move on Donald Trump? I don't know. Uh, could they impeach him? Sure, they could. Are they going to? Your guess is as good as mine. Now, I think they might over the Epstein files, but I don't know if they would over this. The reason I say they would use the Epstein files is because the MAGA base wants the Epstein files released. And Donald Trump is not releasing them. He's doing a lot to delay. And that's something else we're looking at this month. Now, I think it is sometime around the 17th to the 20th, somewhere in there is where the deadline is going to be for the DOJ to release the Epstein files. Now, they are supposed to be in a downloadable, searchable format. And after that, with the files, people are going to start digging through all of it. Now, they may try to redact out a bunch of Republican names or Donald Trump and his associates, etc. It's not going to work, right? Because people are going to be able to figure out who's actually in there based on context clues, things like that. And not only that, these aren't the only copies of the files. What the DOJ has is not the only version of anything that exists. Many people have seen bits and pieces of what's in there. We have stuff coming out from the Epstein estate that is, you know, painting a different picture than what the DOJ wants us to believe. There's going to be more coming out, and even members of the Republican Party, Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene, for the little bit of time she has left in Congress, has said that if this administration does anything to mess with the files being released, et cetera, that they would read the names of the client list that was given to them by the victims on the House floor. Now, why would they do it on the House floor? Well, they can't get sued that way. They couldn't get sued for defamation. They couldn't get sued for anything because of the speech and debate clause that prohibits them from facing any penalty for what they are saying while they are in official capacity as a member of Congress. That being while they are speaking on the House or the Senate floor. So the Epstein file release is something we are watching. Now, I still think that if this administration bucks it too much and they try to play games, etc., that the Republicans in Congress may ultimately end up moving on Donald Trump. And they could end up saying, okay, it's time for him to go, draft articles of impeachment saying, well, we can't have a president who is openly, as late as his first term while Epstein was still alive. We know they were still at least in contact, and apparently, and I think it was 2017, Donald Trump had Thanksgiving dinner with Jeffrey Epstein while president. And they can say, well, we can't really have a president who is pals and who was doing things with a known child sex trafficker, and that he's in the files, and we have all these things that prove he did things to underage girls, that he is a pedophile, and don't mince the words about what actually he is. Some people will come and try to say, well, no, because they were above a certain age, it's a different word. We know what we you know what we mean when we say that. It's pedantic. But anyway, they go ahead and they could say, hey, Donald Trump needs to go because he's in the files, and they could draft articles of impeachment against him. Now, I believe at any point, whether it is articles of impeachment led by Democrats, whether it's articles of impeachment led by Republicans, because of the margins in the House of Representatives, if it passes the House, even though it only takes like 4 votes right now for Republicans, that if it passes the House, I am convinced right now that there would be a conviction in the Senate. Why? Because why would you send over articles of impeachment if you didn't think you could get enough votes? Why would you go after a president of your own party when you control both chambers of Congress? And why would you do that if you didn't think you could actively remove him, aside from publicly embarrassing him? I just don't think they do it. I think they wait, and that they've had discussions behind closed doors, and that um, they could do it. Now, we had heard a while back that on certain issues, if articles of impeachment would make it to the Senate, that the Senate already had the votes to get rid of him. Um, I think it was on deploying the military. I don't remember the exact reason, but something with the military. But I think that what they'll do is if they end up removing Donald Trump, they're going to want to go with JD Vance. And they're going to probably try to do it ahead of the primaries if they can, but ultimately ahead of the midterms, probably. Why? Because then they can try to sell it to the voters of, well, you got to give us 2 more years of control in the House and the Senate so we can help President Vance, move forward his agenda. But Vance isn't the most likable person, right? The Republicans got a problem running JD Vance. MAGA doesn't like him. The Republican Party don't entirely like him. The independents don't like him. The liberals don't like him. He's going to be a hard sell to the American people. But if they can try to spin it so he is some kind of uh, favorable story here, where they can say, hey, you need to give him more time because he just got in. He's got to fix the Democrats' mess. And they're going to blame the Democrats, not Donald Trump. And that he's still got to fix everything from Joe Biden. That they're going to try to use that to make him sympathetic and hope for the best here. Now, is it going to work? Probably not. I think if they move to JD Vance, he himself is going to be a one-term president, period. Now, if JD Vance takes over at any point before January 20th, 2027, he would be limited to the remainder of Donald Trump's term and one additional term. Anytime after January 20th, 2027, he could get 2 terms additional of his own, presuming he would win. Now, I don't think he's got a chance in hell, but I don't think he's got a chance in hell of winning. But if they do decide to run JD Vance, um, that may be where they go. Now, there was a poll out that suggested that Donald Trump Jr. right now is actually leading or gaining ground, I don't remember which, against JD Vance in a head to head poll. Now, that may change by the time we get to 28. 2028 is a long ways away, politically speaking. Donald Trump and the Trump brand, the Trump name, may not be as favorable by that point. If the Republicans move on Donald Trump and they find a way, especially if I'm right, and they're going to use the Epstein files, this may end up shying people away from anybody connected with the name Trump. That he may ultimately end up a pariah, and his family and his kids, etc., will ultimately end up sharing his fate just by having his name, and they won't be able to elect somebody named Trump. So I could see the Republicans doing that. Now, beyond that, they also have the 25th Amendment as an option if Donald Trump's health continues to decline. And he's given us multiple reasons as to why we should be worried about his health. We have the images of him not being able to walk a straight line, not even straight-ish. He was zigzagging far enough way back several months ago when he met Vladimir Putin in Russia, where they literally rolled out a red carpet for him, and he was literally all over the carpet. He was walking almost in an S pattern. He could not walk a straight line, not even close. If I'd walk in a straight line the way he did, you know, I'd be having cops administer other field sobriety tests trying to see if I was actually drunk in public. It looked that bad. Then you have images and videos of him dragging his foot. It appears that he is not raising his foot now as he walks, which is a sign potentially of a stroke. That you lose control of the muscle, and lifting your leg becomes very hard. That's why they do. You see the ads for things like Bath Fitter, where they do walk-in tubs, where it comes up 4 feet off the ground or whatever, but the lip of the tub where you actually step over is only like 2 inches, very very low. But then it's a very high tub for older people, things like that. And Donald Trump having problems controlling his legs is just another sign that he may be having strokes or other mental problems. Now, they told us about this venous condition that he's got, which, if they're willing to tell us that much, I guarantee you his condition is actually that much worse. Now, Donald Trump, beyond his leg lifting and his weaving, you have the fact that he is falling asleep in public. And yet again, happened just recently. They were doing a press conference with Pete Hegseth over this scandal that we were talking about the boats. And it appeared that Donald Trump had fallen asleep in public yet again. He's done it numerous times. And every time he does, the questions start coming. Is he okay? Is he going to make it? And I've mentioned it before. It reminds me of my grandfather. Now, my grandfather made it till he was in his 90s, but in his later years, he was in a nursing home. And I remember going to go visit him, and we'd be having a conversation. And all of a sudden, he'd just doze off. We'd continue our conversation, and 20, 30 minutes later, he'd wake back up like nothing happened. It reminds me of what Donald Trump is going through. Now, he's not dozing off for 20 or 30 minutes at a time, but that's not how my grandfather started either. It was short bursts. And it was even happening during events like my father was very religious. When he would go to church services, and he didn't do it intentionally, but he just could not physically stay awake. And that reminds me of what Donald Trump is doing at this point. If he gets bored, if the attention isn't on him, if he's not the one talking, he kind of spaces out and then he physically can't stay awake. It causes more concern about his health. Then you have the face drooping. And this whole situation is just uh, concerning when you add all of it together. Then you add the fact that he went to Walter Reed back in October for his second yearly physical, the second one we know about, and he had an MRI. Now, he doesn't know what that MRI was looking at. He claims he had the best scan he's ever had, but he doesn't know what they were looking at. So, how does he know it was a good or bad or whatever, other than they probably told him, oh, everything looks great, you're in good shape, which is exactly what you would tell somebody like Donald Trump. He is not willing to accept the kind of shape he is actually in. He believes he's 6'3" and like 220, 230 pounds, when in reality he is probably closer to 5'10" and about 300 to 320. And he's just not in as physically fit of a shape as he thinks he is. Well, he doesn't want to admit that he's got problems, but he had this MRI. Well, they're pressuring him to release the MRI. So he says he's going to do it. Now we'll see if that actually comes out, what the MRI was looking at and what they were looking to gain out of it. But he doesn't know. But he also talks, and he talked about it again just the other day about taking a cognitive test. Because he said, well, that he's going to release the MRI, but he goes, well, they weren't looking at my brain because they gave me an IQ test and I passed that for the thousandth time. It wasn't an IQ test, it was the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. You give the Montreal Cognitive Assessment to somebody who is suspected of having brain injuries, stroke, dementia, something like that. And it is designed to look at differing factors and see where they are at mentally. Now, some of the questions are like they'll have like the numbers 1 through 10 and the first 10 letters of the alphabet, and you got to draw a line from like 1 to A, 2 to B, things like that, just to see if you can make the connections there. Then they will ask you, like, do you know who the current president is? Now, for Donald Trump, you could have asked him that at any point between 2016 and now, and he would say himself, regardless of the fact that for 4 of those years it was Joe Biden. But anyway, that's one question you could ask. Oh. And beyond that, they ask you to name like 3 animals and all of this. It is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. Okay, Donald Trump has taken it more than once, and the fact they keep giving it to him tells me that there is something wrong with Donald Trump. Now, that would mean if they decide to move on Donald Trump with the 25th Amendment, J.D. Vance would have to be the one to initiate it. And it would take uh, J.D. Vance and the cabinet telling Congress that there is a problem with Donald Trump. And then he would have a chance to respond saying, well, no, I'm fine. And if J.D. Vance says there's a problem, Donald Trump says he's fine, Congress would have to take it up and they would have to vote on it. And if enough members of Congress, which I think it's 2/3 of both chambers, say yeah, you're not fine, you're not well. We agree you are no longer president. He would be out of office. It's a high bar. And I don't think JD Vance makes that move unless he knows for a fact that he has got the votes in both chambers to make it happen. Now, you would assume a lot of Democrats would be on their side, and I think they would, unless they just want to ride it out and stick with Donald Trump because they think it's actually more advantageous in the elections. But I think that would backfire on the Democrats. Not getting rid of Donald Trump when given the opportunity, I think would actually backfire on Democrats because people would say, well, you could have at least slowed down this dumpster fire, but instead you kept us going. Now, why would Republicans move on Donald Trump? Well, again, they want to get reelected. We talk about it a lot. Okay. And the tides are turning against the Republican Party. At the rate the elections went last month in November, there was huge swings in favor of the Democratic Party, winning seats by 60 to 65, almost 70%. You had 3 state seats in Mississippi go Democrat, enough to break the uh, supermajority that the Republicans held in Mississippi that they've held for like 12 years. You have special elections like here in Iowa, where districts that had gone Republican for 8, 10 years plus finally broke and went Democrat. It's just the signs are on the wall. And I think a big sign about what is coming up is going to happen tomorrow. Now, tomorrow, as you are listening to this, is December 2nd. That is that special election in Tennessee. Now, this is a district that Donald Trump won by 22 percentage points. So that's huge. Now, the current polling is showing Afton Bain, the Democrat, uh, within 2 percentage points of the Republican. Is it Van Nuys, Van Epps, something like that? I don't remember exactly, but doesn't matter. Anyway, the Afton Bain has closed the gap to within 2 percentage points, and usually these polls have a 3% margin of error. Which, if the poll is correct, that would mean Afton Bain could win with 1% of the vote and beat the uh, Republican by 1%, or they could lose by 5. That's how that math works. However, the simple fact that Afton Bain has closed that gap, even if the poll ends up right on the money and it's at 22%, that's a warning sign to Republicans. It really, really is. So it's a warning sign to Republicans because they end up looking foolish if they don't win this by a significant margin in a district that was safe Trump just a year ago, just a little over a year ago. Donald Trump wins it by 22 percentage points, and let's say they lose that district. The Republicans got to go, oh shit, how many other districts are the Democrats going to pick up? And the writing on the wall starts to look bad. Now, this has a major effect on the House of Representatives. Okay. The House of Representatives is currently sitting at 213 Democrats to 219 Republicans. Now, if Afton Bain wins her seat in Tennessee, that brings it to 214. Then there's a special election in Texas that is it's a runoff, and that happens in January, I believe. Haven't heard the exact date yet, but I believe it's going to be January. It is going to be two Democrats running that seat. Okay, so you have a Democrat versus a Democrat. No write-in candidates. One of them has to win. Automatic Democrat pickup. That brings them to 215. Okay. Then you have Mickey Sherrill's seat in New Jersey. That's going to be another Democratic pickup. That it should be a safe Democrat seat. That brings them to 216. Okay. Then that brings us right around that same time frame. Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat leaves in January. She resigns. Now, by mid-March or so, there would be a special election in Georgia. Now, the chances of flipping a Georgia special election seat are pretty slim. But let's say Marjorie Taylor Greene's seat, for the sake of argument, let's say the Democrat picks that seat up. That brings it to 218 Republican to 217 Democrat. Okay, that is uh, pretty bad, right? Like that would be a horrible margin for Mike Johnson to be in. He could lose one vote on anything, and they'd be out. And it would take just one Republican to resign and have their seat won by a Democrat, for them to switch parties, which could happen, something like that. Democrats would just need to pick up one more seat, and uh, that would end up being a Democratic flip. They would have control of the House of Representatives as of whenever that happened, riding out to the end of this Congress, which would then go till January 3rd, 2027, after the midterms in 26. Well, if the Democrats have control, Donald Trump's getting nothing else through. His time's done. And it's only going to increase their lead, I think, during the midterms. But if the Democrats pick up enough seats to win uh, control of the House, Donald Trump's getting nothing else through, period. There's going to be investigations. They are going to look at everything. And this is regardless of whether or not they get the House before the midterms or wait until next Congress, January 3rd, 2027. Democrats are going to be investigating everything. And there's going to be all kinds of investigations looking at his tearing down of the East Wing of the White House and this ballroom he wants to build. Going to be looking at the actions with Venezuela. Going to be looking at his tariffs. Going to be looking at his immigration. Going to be looking at everything. Democrats are going to be holding public hearings, and the more this gets laid out, the worse it's going to look for this administration. The worse the Republicans are going to look, and it is not going to be pretty. Now, is it possible that the Democrats could flip the House early? Yes. I was in a live last night with Legal Dad on TikTok. Now, I was just in the audience. I was not a panelist by any means, but we were talking about flipping the House ahead in that scenario I was just talking about. And not sure if it's ever happened in the House, but one of the other guests in the live, one of the other people in the chat said in 21, the Senate, or in 2001, I should say, I'm sorry, that the Senate flipped by one seat because of a senator switching parties. It was a 50-50 split, and one of them switched parties, and I don't remember which way the Senate broke after that as far as who had control. But it was enough to, if it was, well, I guess it would have been Democrats would have got control if it was 2001, because Bush would have been in office. Dick Cheney would have been the tie-breaking vote with a 50-50 split. So yeah, apparently it is possible to do something just like that. And when they are down to a one-seat majority, multiple Republicans may be looking at the writing on the wall saying, hey, we got to jump ship. Some of them may jump to becoming independent, caucusing with Democrats. They may end up just becoming Democrats, hoping that it will save them in the midterms. Um, who knows? Just going to have to keep watching and seeing it. It's going to start with tomorrow with Afton Bain's election in Tennessee. If Afton Bain wins their Senate seat, or their House seat, I should say, if they win the House seat, that is going to be the beginnings of the end of this administration. As far as it's going to scare Republicans, it's going to put more pressure on Republicans to be more bipartisan, etc. It is going to be bad news for Donald Trump. And it's going to pretty much turn Donald Trump into a lame duck. Now, beyond that, we already have cracks forming in the Republican Party. I was talking about it earlier. You have this uh, discharge petition that came up a while back that involved the Epstein files. Unusual that a discharge petition actually works. They only work like 6% of the time. But anyway, Republicans had decided to uh, side with all Democrats, and they pushed this discharge petition through. And they didn't even need to do that. If you look at the way the vote went, they shouldn't have needed a discharge petition to go around Mike Johnson. Remember, Mike Johnson was trying to prevent the Epstein files from being released. He didn't even want to vote on it. Now, if Donald Trump really wanted the files released, he could have just told Pam Bondi, his attorney general, to make it happen. And that could have happened. But they didn't do that. So what they did instead was they ended up going around Mike Johnson with the discharge petition. They hold this vote. Since then, there was another discharge petition. Now, I don't know when the vote is going to be held on that measure. And that one's got a different fate. We don't know if the Senate's going to take it up. That one is on collective bargaining and basically reinforcing the idea that the federal government must collectively bargain with federal unions because Donald Trump is trying to do away with the federal unions. He doesn't like unions. He doesn't like bargaining. Doesn't like paying people fair wages, etc. But they used a discharge petition to force a vote on that. Now we are hearing there could be as many as 3 more discharge petitions coming up. So there could be more discharge petition votes. Now, one of them is on this new one that just has gotten to enough signatures, and that is on stock trading by Congress. This would basically prevent members of Congress from being able to publicly trade stocks. They would be able to do things like 401k planning or going in and buying into like a plan, like a mutual fund, where it's just a mess of stocks where you buy into it and that plan manages the money. It's separate. Like they're not buying individual stocks. Now, we will see if that ultimately gets passed. Donald Trump has signaled a willingness to sign that piece of legislation. Okay. And this needs to be done. You have far too many members of Congress that are making far too much money by trading stocks when they have access to information the general public doesn't have. And it becomes a thing, right? The whole thing is you get elected to Congress, you should not end up being there for just a couple of years, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's retiring after 5 years, and she's walking away, with millions. And that's a problem. We need to prevent them from doing this. Now, we'll see if they actually vote to take it up. The problem with regulating Congress always comes down to the people that have to vote to regulate Congress is Congress. And if they're making money, tons of money, hands over fist, playing the stocks, why would they vote to end the gravy train for themselves? But they apparently have 218 votes in the House to pass it. They are going to go around Mike Johnson. Now, I think there was another issue, and I can't seem to remember which one that was. But the third issue that they are talking about using a discharge petition for is the ACA subsidies. Now, there was a bipartisan or is a bipartisan agreement. It seems like we've almost got the votes for it. Is going to extend the ACA subsidies for 2 years, and basically would keep everything else the same. Now, there was some discrepancies about some other issues with it, about some income requirements. And of course, Republicans are probably going to want to tie work requirements to it as well. Thing is, most people who are getting their insurance through the ACA are already working. This is not really for low income people. It's for people who just do not have access to a decent plan through their employer. They don't have access to a health care plan. So if your employer isn't providing you one, then you need somewhere to get insurance. Now, if you go get a private plan by yourself, you're going to pay hundreds of dollars a month in premium because you're only insuring you. And the only way the insurance company doesn't lose money by insuring you is if they charge you an exorbitant premium and you never use your insurance. But if you get in with a group like what the ACA allows you to do, you pay lower premiums and you hope that you still never need it, but the insurance company is willing to give you a cheaper rate because they make money on people paying the lower rate and never needing it. And they're hoping that they bring in enough premiums to offset the one person who does need to use the insurance. Now, private insurance has been a problem, but we have to do something to fix it, right? And extending the ACA subsidies is a way to do it. Now, Donald Trump does not like the idea of extending the subsidies, in part because it is connected to Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. If it was named after Donald Trump, I think he'd be perfectly fine with it. But because it's not, he doesn't like that idea. He would rather send the money to the American people. Problem is, if they don't do something like what they were talking about, like doing a Trump healthcare plan or a Trump health savings plan, I should say, um, then you could spend the money on whatever. Well, no guarantee people spend it on healthcare, then they rack up bills, they go bankrupt, and it doesn't help anywhere. It doesn't help out as much as what they think it would. It's a dumb plan. But on this plan from the House, it was going to be a bipartisan agreement. It was going to extend the ACA subsidies for a couple of years. It was going to put I think, some top end income limits. So basically, a cap for, well, you could only get your insurance on the exchange up to a certain dollar amount that you make a year. If not, you at least don't qualify for the subsidies because you can afford the insurance. You make too much, basically. Which you know what? I'm okay with that because I think the cap was going to be like 100 and some thousand plus a year. Most people who are making that kind of money, they don't need the help that the subsidies are offering. Anyway, the other thing that they were talking about doing, and this is one of the reasons why Donald Trump's healthcare plan did not get released, is they want to put in more restrictions on abortion access. And they want to limit money used for the ACA subsidies to going toward plans that cover abortion access. Well, federal law already prevents uh, federal money from being spent on abortion access, but one of the an abortion care. But the problem is Republicans don't even want that money to go toward premiums for an insurance policy that covers any sort of abortion care. Now, there's all kinds of reasons as to why a woman may need to get an abortion, between serious health complications for the child, for her, who knows, right? But Republicans have long demonized anybody who gets an abortion. Just that, well, why would you ever consider it? But there's other things that also fall technically, under abortion care. And we are finding out the hard way what these very restrictive abortion laws actually translate to. When you can't get treatment for an ectopic pregnancy, you can't get that. They can't do anything for you because that is still considered an abortion, and the doctors don't want to be sued over the if they have a heartbeat bill or whatever, or if it falls outside of their ban, and they say, well, I could lose my license for it, and then they play on the side of caution and they don't do the procedure, risking people's lives. You also have the DNC, which would be a did not carry, where uh, a woman already had miscarried, but her body didn't fully process that and needs a little bit of help dealing with that. Again, so that is still classified payment wise as an abortion, and some Republicans are saying, well, that should be covered. But in practicality, with the way these laws are written, they're not. And the providers are erring on the side of caution, again, not wanting to risk their license. So these services aren't being offered. And now Republicans are saying, well, we need to tack in more restrictions onto it with money going into the ACA. Like I said, there's already federal laws prohibiting the use of federal dollars for abortion services. But some state laws do allow, if they kick in money into the Affordable Care Act plan for that state, that those plans can have access, and it becomes a gray area, and they want to clear up that loophole. Now we'll see if that actually ends up happening, but they were talking about using a discharge petition to bring it up on the floor. And I think if they do, they are going to kick it over to the Senate. And the Senate has already promised a vote on at least one ACA related measure this term by the end of the year. Now, I saw a couple of TikTokers talking about this. Apparently, before the insurance companies lock in their pricing for next year, they have only until like the 16th, 17th, 18th, somewhere in there this month. They don't have all month. They are up against a clock to do something on the ACA subsidies. Now, I think they may still pass something because the Republicans do not want the ACA subsidies to lapse going into next year with the midterms, because there's going to be a lot of people that are affected, especially in Republican led states that are going to start losing their health care. And if their health care goes up because of the ACA subsidies not getting passed, it's going to be a hard sell to try to convince them that they were doing it for their own good. The problem is when people start feeling the effects of their own decisions, they suddenly start waking up to how bad those decisions were. Now, one of the ways Republicans have always spun their voters against the Affordable Care Act has been to label it Obamacare. And to this day, there's a lot of people that do not like Obamacare but love the Affordable Care Act. And when the ACA subsidies go away and their health insurance starts going up, how are Republicans going to spin it? Are they going to try to blame it on Obamacare? That, well, it's because of Obamacare that your policies went up. No, it's because you let these subsidies lapse. And then as people realize that the ACA is Obamacare, it just their way of spinning this propaganda, it's not going to work, I don't think. It's getting to the point where they can't keep telling the lie and having people believe it. It's the same thing with Donald Trump talking about affordability. He wants you to believe prices are down, but yet you go to the store and you're paying almost $8, $9 for a pound of ground beef. You're paying $10 for a 12 pack of pop. It gets too expensive at this point. People realize how bad the economy's doing, and because we haven't gotten job numbers and because the stock market's kind of riding that same point, it's an inflated sense that the economy's doing well. Now, we just got through Black Friday weekend. We had Black Friday, we had Small Business Saturday. Today would be Cyber Monday. Um, and we don't know how well this blackout is going to go. There was a lot of people who said they weren't buying anything for Black Friday. And it got the reported level of this boycott got so bad that Walmart even went ahead and said, oh shit, we got to do something. We may not make our Black Friday sales this year. And they went ahead and they started their Black Friday deals mid-month, trying to get ahead of it. Now, some of the younger folks out there may not remember how crazy Black Friday used to be. Black Friday used to be insane, where the deals were so good that you had people camping out, waiting in lines for hours to be first in line to get some of these deals. Um, and I remember one of the years there was a major news story. I believe it was a Walmart, because they used to close on Thanksgiving, then open up day after, and they would turn around and uh, like the minute they opened the doors, the crowd rushed in and they trampled somebody. I think he still lived, but still, there was videos of a guy getting trampled by a mob during Black Friday as they were rushing in. There used to be videos coming out on the news on Black Fridays where you'd see people literally getting into fights over the deals, etc. And I don't even think deals like that, if they could go back to that level of excitement and that level of savings, would be enough to save Black Friday this year. People just can't afford. Now, I've seen some things by creators on the right talking about Black Friday, saying, well, hey, if the economy is really that bad, did you really need to go out and buy something during Black Friday? You know, why'd you go get it when it was on wait for that really ridiculous sale? Well, that was the point. If the economy was doing well, you're not as worried about um, saving a buck here and a buck there. They miss the point entirely. They look at if Black Friday actually did well, they would say, well, see, the economy's not that bad, not realizing that people who are struggling are looking for any sort of deal they can get, right? I was having a conversation with my father, and we were talking about grocery prices and about how bad it's gotten, et cetera. And one of the things I told him, I'm like, every time I get groceries, I check the beef prices. And if beef's on sale, whether I need it or not, because it's getting up there into almost $7, $8 a pound at this point, if not more. Um, if it's at a decent price, I'll get what I can afford because it'll keep in the freezer for a while. And, you know, why pay a higher price down the road, and taking full advantage? Maybe I'll skimp on something else to get a little more beef while it's on sale for ground beef or what have you, because I can't afford to keep spending out $8, $9 a pound, $7 a pound, whatever the price currently is. We all need to sit there and watch our budget a little bit. I get it. Um, the economy's not as good as what Donald Trump would have you believe, but they think if they keep saying, "Well, everything's down, it's more affordable," that they're going to continue to believe the lie. It's not going to work. Now, Democrats, they need to run a message of affordability and accountability, right? Making everything more affordable and holding this administration, including Donald Trump, accountable for the things they've done and the damage they have caused. And I think that potentially could be a winning combination for them, not only in the midterms, but in 2028. Now, we got the midterms coming up, and we're already seeing movement about how things are going to change. But if Afton Bain wins her special election by even a few percentage points, that will just reinforce my uh, idea for what I think the midterms are going to look like. And I really do think that the midterms are going to go to the Democrats and that they are going to win 40 or 50 seats in the House and they may flip the Senate. Now, I think at best for the Democrats, um, they could maybe flip up to 6 seats. That would be very, very tough. Um, even four, and they need four to flip control of the Senate, period. Even four is going to be tough, but it's doable, depending on what the Republicans do. Now, here in Iowa, I think Iowa is a seat that potentially could be up for grabs. You have Joni Ernst, who is retiring. She is not seeking reelection. It is going to be an open field. Now, we are going to have to see who is running for either nomination. So far, I have not heard any names that really stand out to me on either side as a breakout star, as somebody who could have a chance. But if they can pick up Iowa, that's one. And I think with a lot of the things going on, with some of the changes coming in Iowa, that it might be possible. Then you have Maine, you have Graham Plattner. If he wins the primary, I think there's a good chance that the Democrats flip Maine and unseat Susan Collins. And I personally can't stand Susan Collins, and she's not even my senator, because I've lost count of how many times she has come out about anything and said, well, I have my concerns. Oh, I'm so concerned about this. And then still votes in support of whatever she was concerned about. It's false concern and it's performative at best, but I think that's a possible pickup. Then you have North Carolina with Roy Cooper running, very popular governor. His term limited out, couldn't run for governor again, has already been able to win multiple times statewide in North Carolina. Could be a pickup there. And then you look at Texas. And uh, James Cornyn is the one senator that is not Ted Cruz. Okay. But they are going to be, there's going to be a primary. And Ken Paxton is running, the corrupt attorney general for the state of Texas, is running to primary out James Cornyn. If Ken Paxton wins, it's just going to help the Democrat because Ken Paxton isn't very well liked. And if the primary fight gets messy, or Paxton decides to launch a third party attempt or something like that, that could just again help the Democrat potentially win. Is it Tellerico? I think is the guy running in Texas. Either again, it's possible, and if they pick up the House and the Senate, Donald Trump will get nothing done. His the second half of his term is going to be full of investigations, and it is going to be horrible. So we got a lot to watch as we're getting into this month. A lot of things coming up, a lot of things to keep an eye on, starting as early as tomorrow with the special election. And it's only going to continue to get worse for Donald Trump every single day um, from here on. Every day is going to get worse. He's going to have more and more to answer for. And being a narcissist like he is backed into a corner. It's getting worse for him. He can't juggle his way out of all of this. He can't divert and distract his way out of all of these situations. It is going to keep getting more and more difficult for him. And he is not going to be able to keep it all going. He could end up suffering some kind of a mental breakdown or something like that in response. And ultimately, I think the Republicans may end up walking away from Donald Trump, calling it quits on him. And I know it sounds crazy, but I think they could do it. And it all might start depending on how bad tomorrow's election goes, and then with the election or the Epstein files, I mean, when those start to come out, if there's as much damning things in there about Donald Trump as we think there are, the Republicans may be left with no choice but to move away from him just to save their own asses. So we got a lot to watch this month, and I'll be here every day with a podcast giving you my breakdown of everything going on as we navigate this world of news and politics, and we look at all of the crazy events happening. So I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. That's going to do it for the Analytical Iowan podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with even more because there's always something to talk about.